Available at audible.com. The Warrior Code, the SEAL Strike Series, Book 2, by M.L. Strong. Narrated by Edison McDaniels. The Pentagon, Washington, D.C. Matt stood in the waiting room shuffling his feet nervously. This was his first visit to the Pentagon. The feeling of intimidation was overwhelming at first, but the longer he stood there, the more relaxed he became. The Pentagon was nothing more than a huge office building, and he was a warrior surrounded by clerks and politicians. Easy day. It was interesting to watch so many senior officers from the various services moving about the hallways, scurrying up and down the passageways. He noted that most were not in good physical condition, a fact that confirmed Matt's assessment that he was in the world's largest nest of staff pukes, top-heavy paper pushers trying to rule their military kingdoms from a desk, never getting their hands dirty, at least anymore. He still wasn't sure why he was there. His orders had been clear as mud, and the sense of urgency he'd felt in Coronado didn't seem justified considering the long wait once he'd arrived. After 3 hours, a civilian security guard waved him over to the information desk near the main entry turnstiles. The staff personnel at the information desk confessed they were impressed with the origin of his written orders, but were as confused as Matt as to their meaning. They decided to make a call rather than allow him access. The young lady hung up the phone and smiled. He was given visitor credentials and directed to go back to the waiting area. Someone would arrive shortly to escort him to his destination. 10 minutes later, Matt was greeted by a tall Army colonel. "Lieutenant Barrett?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Matt replied. "I was told to—" The colonel interrupted Matt, extending his hand. "My name is Colonel Rushworth. Please be patient. You'll soon know more than you really want to know." Colonel Rushworth reinforced his mysterious comment with a wink. Matt followed the colonel up the escalator, adding to the stream of people coming into work in this famous building. It was a long walk, and Matt felt silly about his anger at being made to wait so long. The facility was so large that getting anywhere was a test of endurance. At last, they arrived at a large door. Matt was directed to drop his cell phone off outside. He placed it in a rack of 20 or so phones already being held hostage and walked through the door. Matt was ushered into what appeared to be a small briefing room. 3 men sat around an oval conference table. None of the men stood up to shake Matt's hand. One of the men, a Navy admiral, pointed to a chair. "Please take a seat, Lieutenant." Matt couldn't stop staring at all the fruit salad on the man's chest. Each colored ribbon represented a different military award, and the 4 stars on the admiral's collar were certainly impressive. Matt spotted an elaborate badge positioned just under the man's breast pocket. It suddenly dawned on him that he was sitting across from the Chief of Naval Operations, C&O. The man to the C&O's right was wearing a suit. He was in his early 50s, with a touch of gray at the temples. He had that air of authority that comes with access to the top. He was one of the untouchables. The man oozed arrogance from every pore. Matt was sure this schmuck was CIA, or maybe NSA. He decided then and there that he disliked him. At the end of the table sat a gentleman Matt recognized immediately, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. His mouth opened a little involuntarily in surprise. What the hell was this all about? "Welcome, Lieutenant Barrett. I trust your trip from San Diego was pleasant." Matt betrayed himself by swallowing hard before answering. "Yes, sir. Thank you, sir." The chairman began with introductions. "Mr. Barrett, this is Mr. Collins, the assistant to the director of operations for the CIA." The suit stared back at Matt before offering his hand. Great, Matt thought. Some insecure idiot that wants to play head games. Matt returned the handshake and then promptly ignored him. The chairman took all this in before introducing the admiral. "This is the Chief of Naval Operations, Admiral Jackson." Matt smiled and shook the offered hand. "It's nice to see the Navy here, sir." Matt wanted the admiral to know he might need an ally. Matt turned his attention back to the chairman. "Please excuse me, sir, if I appear a little confused." "That's understandable, Mr. Barrett." The chairman slid a plain yellow 8x10 envelope across the table toward Matt. "Lieutenant, the contents of that folder will explain some of the issues we are going to be dealing with during the pre-mission planning phase for Operation Green Dagger. We have 2 Americans in jeopardy, Lieutenant. They've been taken hostage, and we presume they are being moved as we speak to a large base camp south of Bogota, Colombia. You will find the details and background information in the envelope. All our intelligence resources are at your disposal. Available at audible.com.